Welcome to Gather In, where you'll hear stories of conversion to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If you have an interesting story to tell, please go to our Instagram page or send us an email to gatherin@proton.me. Welcome to Gather In, and welcome to Scott Salvesen from Family Bro Evening. How are you, Scott?
I'm good. How are you, Elder Ceff?
Oh, well, I've been cooling down for the last hour or so from my early morning exercise in 30 degree Celsius heat. It just took ages to cool down, so I'm glad I've sort of cooled down because I've got the tie on now, and it's hard. It's hard wearing a tie. It's hard wearing a tie in this heat, I can tell you.
I am familiar. I served my mission in Florida. It would get to about 40 degrees there during the summer, and it was not fun, I'll tell you.
Yeah. So it's the hardest part of serving as a missionary here in Cairns. So for those people who are joining now, there's a couple of people coming on. I'm based in the Australia Brisbane mission. And my wife and I are the most northern serving senior couple, and going north in Australia means you're getting close to the equator, and it's hot, and it's tough. It's tough wearing the white shirt and tie here in Cairns. I get jealous of the nice loose blouses and sort of open necks that my wife can wear. Can't I wear that? It's just. It's not fair, but the white shirt and tie is highly recognisable. We often go places and people come up to us and say, "Hey, we're from we're from somewhere else, and we want to know where to go to church, or we used to be a member of the church somewhere, or whatever." So, there are advantages to wearing the white shirt, the name tag, and the tie. People do recognise you. So I'm cool down. I'm ready to talk.
Very good. Let's do it.
Actually, Scott, what I'm ready to do is not talk so much, but to listen. Because
okay.
I want you to do most of the talking today. And when I first came across you and John on Family Bro Evening, and I read your bios, and then I sort of looked and listened to you, I was thinking, which one's the South African?
Yeah, that's a question that comes up every now and again, for sure.
Which one is it? Because neither of you sound South African, but I understand you are the one who grew up in South Africa.
That is true. I was born and raised in South Africa and moved to the States when I was 14 years old. Okay,
so 14 years in South Africa, and you're about 25 now, so you've only been in the States 8 years or so?
I'm 31, actually.
31, there you go. Oh, look, I was taking a nice guess,
Well, I appreciate that. Well, so I recently shaved my beard, and everyone says it takes 5 years off my life whenever I do.
It does. It does. So you've lived more than half your life in the States now?
Yeah, just barely. As of, I think, April of last year, it was more than half my life.
Okay. So you grew up in South Africa. So you grew up away from Latter-day Saint Church headquarters in Salt Lake City.
Quite far, yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about growing up in a Latter-day Saint family in South Africa. Was your family, perhaps a little bit of an oddity in the social scene there, like going to school, for example, in South Africa?
Surprisingly, no. So, in the elementary school, well, what the Americans will call elementary school, what the rest of the world calls primary school, there was about 900 kids in the primary school I went to, and about 10 of them, there were about 10 kids that were LDS. So there were a decent number of us comparatively, and we knew each other. We didn't all go to the same ward. We were kind of spread out. But we kind of knew each other, and it's the same thing when I went to high school. I did 1 year of high school in South Africa before moving to the States, and it was kind of the same. It was about 1,200 kids in the high school, and there was about 15, 20 LDS kids. So it wasn't that unusual. Like, we knew who we were, and we would greet each other and everything. But ironically, most of my close friends growing up were pretty religious. So one of my best friends growing up was actually an American. His family were from Idaho, and his parents were Nazarene missionaries that were kind of assigned to the area. So that was like an easy connection because we're both two pretty religious families. One of my other friends, he actually almost joined the church when I was growing up, but his dad wouldn't give up drinking, which was pretty sad. But someone who almost joined the church, and only one of my friends growing up was really a-religious, I would say, like they didn't have a religion. We were unusual in other ways. Like the word of wisdom was a big thing that people thought was strange to us. But other than that, like, we weren't that much of an oddity, to be honest. South Africa's a pretty Christian nation, so like it wasn't that strange.
Yeah, look, it's possibly a more Christian nation than Australia is, because, as you know, Australia was started as a penal colony from the UK, and so there's an awful lot of people in Australia that have a criminal past.
That's I'll reserve the inappropriate comment on that one.
And so we have this irreligious, rebellious streak running through us, perhaps.
That's good.
Anyway, yeah, it's interesting. In Australia, we have quite a lot of South Africans who have migrated to Australia over the years. My best friends growing up were South Africans, and one of those, or both those guys, I still keep in touch with. So there is that sort of connection between South Africa and Australia because of both being part of the Commonwealth, and geographically both being Southern Hemisphere, and both having sort of weird accents.
We're just happy we beat you guys in rugby more often.
But you seem to have lost your weird South African accent.
It comes out. My mother was actually here visiting a little while ago, and my wife turns to me and is like, "You don't talk like that at all around me." And I'm like, "Well, it's because you're American. I just speak how I'm comfortable, I guess." So it comes out every now and again, and especially when I'm at work, when I get a little bit escalated, it comes out, and so that's always fun. The students I work with always get surprised. They're like, "Whoa, you didn't sound like what you usually sound like." And I was like, "Yeah, okay."
South African streak coming out. So growing up through your teenage, well, you didn't get to spend much of your teenage years in South Africa. Yeah. Suddenly,
not that many.
Suddenly, in your early teenage years, you ended up living in the United States, which must have been quite a shock in some ways.
Yeah,
it's a big thing. It's a big thing to move countries. It's no small. It's nothing just to push it aside to say, "Oh, that didn't really matter." I mean, that would have had a major effect on you.
Yeah, it was interesting, and we moved to Utah actually. So we went from, shunted to the edges of the earth in terms of church proximity to the breeding factory, we call it. The Jello belt, as other people call it. So that was very interesting. I went from being one of like 20 LDS kids in my school to like one of 1,400 LDS kids in my school, and it was definitely a culture shock because you didn't really talk religion in school there. It was just like, okay, whatever, you just go about your day. And then you go to Utah and it's just like, okay, everyone is LDS, everyone is doing all these things. Like it was very strange for me.
Yeah. Was it difficult to adjust at all to that change?
For me, it was. I think that's such a hard time to make a major change. Your mid to early teenage years. I mean, I was 14 years old when we moved over, and yeah, like I was a little socially awkward as a teenager. I think most of us were as teenagers. We were just a little socially awkward. I never really got out of that until I was probably in my 20s. I only had a few really good friends in high school. Like I had people like in my ward that I was, friends with, but no one I would really like hang out with, things like that. Most of my really good friends today are my family or people I met in college. Kind of like John. I met John in college, and he's one of my very, very good friends. So that's just how how it goes, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So church-wise, we talked about high school and things like that, but church-wise, did you find it much different?
Oh,
Going
so
to church.
different. People
Yeah,
say it's
that
the same
surprises
church
me.
everywhere, but it really isn't.
Yeah, in what ways was it different?
Well, I think when I moved to the States, the wheels started to turn that there's a big difference between doctrine and culture. And there's a huge difference between doctrine and culture. And my theory is that because a lot of these places in the church are fairly new to the gospel, like South Africa. The first stake in South Africa was in 1970, which was the year my mother was born. So it's like within people's lifetimes that are still very much alive and well that the first stake in South Africa was organized. And the only real reference they had were these American missionaries coming over being like, this is the way the church needs to be run. And we just accepted that as, the policy or however you want to take it. And when we got to the States and we got to Utah, it's like, wait a minute, this is different. Like the doctrine's the same, the lessons are the same, but just the vibe about it is different. Like I mean, I always say Utah's got the best of the best and the worst of the worst, and it was definitely true. Like, I would have kids in my ward who would do some just not great stuff during the week in high school. Then they come and bless the sacrament on Sunday, and it's like, oh, that's interesting. Like, it was kind of odd to me because where I grew up, you were either active or inactive. There's none of the wishy-washy in between that we kind of see, especially in Utah. There's a lot of wishy-washiness, I call it. Kind of these in-betweeners that do it because it's culturally acceptable there. And
Acceptable and expected.
Yeah, absolutely. It was
Yeah.
just so strange that I don't want to say it was hypocritical because we were all teenagers, we were all stupid, but like parents were like that too. It was very strange. I found it very odd. And I always say that about Utah. Like, they have good, strong, wonderful Christ-like members of the church that are just the salt of the earth, will give the shirt off your back, no questions asked. And then you have the complete opposite end of the spectrum where it's just these terrible, terrible people doing things in the name of Christ. And of course, we just had a talk on that in General Conference where it was like, you can't be a disciple of Christ and be doing things that Christ wouldn't want you to do. So, which I thought was a fortuitous talk. I love that talk. But it was just strange how much it was integrated into like public life. And of course, that's not the same in the rest of the U.S., just kind of this unique animal in Utah, how church is so integrated into public life. Like, there's this whole thing where church is on every corner in Utah. It's true. There really is. Like, whole neighborhoods are planned around where the church building is. Like, people just went to the temple because, like, they just went to the temple and there it was. Just because they could. There's no planning about it. Like, we as a youth group, we never went to the temple as a youth group because we just did it on our own. And people would call you up on a Saturday morning. It's like, hey, you want to get up at 5 o'clock and go to the temple with me? And I was like, okay, whatever. It's fine. We'll do that. The politics, it's integrated into the politics. It's just, it's so interesting the way the church runs in Utah compared to the rest of the world.
Yeah. Look, I've visited Utah a couple of times, and I've attended church here. I've attended General Conference, and superficially, it all seems fantastic.
That's true. I would agree with that.
Yeah. So, So you adjusted to going to school, going to church in Utah. At some point, you would have done the normal high school thing and sort of got close to graduating, and graduating from high school also means you're getting close to that age where people start saying, "When are you going on a mission?"
That is true. And I was pretty age changed, so I had to wait till I was 19 to go. So I did a year of college in between going on a mission. I was at BYU for a year, and that's a whole saga on its own for sure. So that was interesting, especially going to BYU before my mission, and having mission prep as like a college course that I could take. And it was like, really? That's so. It was so strange. Like I was learning Book of Mormon for school credit. It was so odd.
Sounds good to me.
Right.
Yeah. So going through that age, it's a difficult age to navigate. We find it difficult with people here, of course. Getting people I guess we can say graduating from seminary to institute. From being a full-time school student to possibly going away as a missionary. It's a difficult phase, and obviously we lose a lot of people at that time. We lose a lot of kids at that time because, it's a big step to make. How did you navigate that step? Because you did it. You went on a mission. Yeah.
So I think I'm kind of unique in that I never really had a reason to not believe anything. Like I never had any particularly strong experiences that led me one way or another. In fact, if anything, my life experience kind of pushed me towards the church because most of my extended family are not members. Most of my friends growing up were not members. And like a lot of them are really miserable. Like I would go to family gatherings, they'd all get drunk and smoking and stuff, and like they just looked miserable. One of my dad's uncles like drank himself to death, and it was just like, if anything, and like a lot of my friends, like when I was growing up, I had a friend who started smoking, he picked up smoking, and another friend who picked up drinking, and they just seemed not to be super happy about it. And I was just like, okay, I'm not going to do that stuff. Thank you very much. Even in Utah, like despite my like social struggles in Utah, like I think I had a pretty decent, there was nothing that pushed or pulled me away. Like I still went to church, I still went to like Mutual growing up, and it was just whatever, I think, like you said, there comes that time where it's like, hey, you're at that age, it's time to go. And obviously I had that year gap that I had to go through in order to go on the mission back then. And so I think there were really two experiences that really kind of solidified it for me. One, when right after I graduated from high school, we do high school graduations in May in the States because the summer is in June, July, August. So the school year was a little wonky. When I moved to the States, I was like, you do school year from when to when? That doesn't make sense. Neither here nor there. But my family did a kind of like a pilgrimage to Nauvoo. And ironically, I live pretty close to Nauvoo, within like a morning's drive to Nauvoo these days. So it's kind of ironic how that went all full circle. But I remember going to Nauvoo, and Nauvoo was fun. Like we walked around, it was a good time. And then we went to Carthage Jail. And Carthage Jail, I think, was a very powerful experience for me. I think I felt a very, very strong connection there to the prophet Joseph Smith. And it wasn't even like this overwhelming, like smash, like eye-opening. It was just kind of like, it was more like along the lines of like, why would this guy lay his life down and go through all that suffering just for something he made up. Like it doesn't make any sort of psychological sense. And like I just was kind of like, yep, like there's no way that this guy was just making it up on the spot, you know, like some people claim it was. Like that's really far to take a joke, you know. I kind of say, you know, if he was kidding about it or making it up, he took it way too far. And then I think kind of the second experience, I have a cousin who's my age, who had also moved to the States before we did. And we were kind of getting ready to go on our missions at the same time. He went about 6 months after me. And it's kind of a silly story because people kind of joke about EFY, which is FSY in other countries. People kind of joke about it, you know. It's kind of annoying and kind of cheesy, but I had been to EFY in the States 2 previous years, and I didn't really take it super seriously. It was just like, okay, I'm here around some cute girls. We're going to like have some fun and whatever. And I didn't really take the spiritual aspect of it super seriously. And I think my last year, my cousin and I, we just kind of looked at each other and we're like, okay, we're both about to go on a mission. It would really suck that we go and waste 2 years of our life for something we don't believe in, so we better figure this thing out. And we actually took the spiritual aspect of it pretty seriously. And we were like, hey, let's buckle down, do all the spiritual stuff they ask us to do, read the scriptures, get super immersed in it. And I think at the end of that week, it was just like, we just kind of looked at each other and we're like, yep, there's no way. And I think that the spirit doesn't really hit me in the same way as other people. You know, some people are like, oh, I feel the burning in the bosom, you know, thing. That doesn't really happen to me. Maybe when I eat a hot burrito or something. But I think that was the first time that it was really like the feeling of the gospel hit me, and it was like a totally different feeling than I'd ever had before. Because usually the spirit talks to me in the logical sense, where things make sense and they line up, and I'm like, okay, that's it right there. And I think that was really the first time that the feeling part of the spirit kind of hit me and was like, okay, yeah, you're good to go, guys, you know?
Yeah. Yeah,
So
fantastic.
that's and like I never really had kind of those troubles in high school. Like I did stupid stuff like every teenager does. You know, that's just the nature of being a teenager. But, you know, I never got in trouble with girls. I never had substance issues or anything like that. And I'm pretty grateful for that. Like I work with kids who have had substance issues and trauma right now. And it's pretty sad what they have to go through so early in life, and I'm grateful I never had to experience that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that's just kind of how it went, is, you know, regular stupid stuff and you figure it out.
Yeah, look, it's even sadder with substance abuse issues when you see kids that are born and grow up with fetal alcohol syndrome. That is so sad, because those poor kids are just suffering from the very poor decisions that their parents made.
I have worked with a few kids with fetal alcohol, and it is very sad because it's not their fault.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and they end up getting into trouble just because they're not very bright and they make bad decisions. Yeah.
Yep, it's incredibly sad. Anytime you see that, where people have their free agency stripped from them, it's incredibly sad.
Yeah. So you did the paperwork. We'll say paperwork, but was it paperwork back when you were putting in your mission papers?
It was online. So I was kind of that in between. Everything was online, but I did have to wait till I was 19.
Yeah. How did you feel when you got your mission call? So you were living in Utah or Idaho at this stage?
I was in Utah. I was at BYU, and my mom just calls me up and is like, "Hey, your mission call's in the mail." And I served in the Florida Jacksonville mission, was where I was called to.
How did you feel about staying within the United States? Were you sort of hoping that you might get called outside, or?
I think it was a mixed bag. For one thing, we were still dealing with some immigration issues. So I kind of knew that I was going to be called stateside because the church typically doesn't want to stir the pot on immigration stuff. So we were working through that, and the church was like, "Hey, we'll send you stateside and be done with it." And so I knew it was coming. And looking back, I'm actually kind of grateful that I went stateside because I didn't have to learn a new language. Well, I kind of did because people speak real different down there, you know. I didn't have to learn a new language. I didn't really have to learn a new culture. I didn't have to learn a new money system or anything like that. I didn't have to like change the way I ate, and I could really focus on like the gospel more. And so, on that part, I'm pretty grateful that I went stateside.
Yeah, look, that's an interesting point, isn't it? You go and serve in those foreign countries, and you have to adjust to all those things, and it can take your focus away from the gospel. I'd never really thought of that. I was fortunate. I served in the New Zealand Christchurch mission when I was young, so culturally, New Zealand and Australia are pretty similar in many ways. Language is the same, food is much the same. Well, within certain limits, I suppose. They just eat a lot more in New Zealand.
Yes. My grandmother is Kiwi, and we visited her a few times, and we ate a lot.
Yeah, you got interesting connections with Australia through.
It's very all over the place.
In fact, I know there's a couple of people from Cairns watching this right now. What was your mother's name when she was living in Cairns and she possibly became a member of the church here in Cairns or possibly in Brisbane? You're not sure, but what was her name?
I'm not entirely sure whether she was baptized in Cairns or Brisbane, but my grandmother's name is Heather Noble.
Heather Noble. Okay, so any Cairns people who happen to be watching this is Heather Noble's grandson I'm talking to.
That is true. And well, even if you're in the Australia Brisbane mission, I mean, she's only been out of Brisbane for about a year now. So if anyone from Brisbane is listening, they probably for sure know her.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Taylor S. Wilson just said, I believe it was in Cairns.
Yeah, Taylor's my sister, and so she's tuning in.
Okay. It's been funny. I've been watching these comments come through, and I don't think you can see the comments come through, can you, Scott?
I can see them, yeah.
Oh, you've been seeing them. So you've been seeing this, your sister and John talking about your South African accent coming out a little bit more for some reason.
Yeah,
while we're talking.
I tell you.
Yeah. So Taylor's saying she thinks it was in Cairns, and it was quite recently. I'm thinking it was going back a long time, but it was only about a year ago.
No. So she moved to the States with us about a year ago, but she was baptized when I was, I think, 16 or 17. I forget the exact timeline, but I was a teenager when she was baptized.
Okay. And the name again was Noble?
Heather Noble.
Heather Noble. Taylor's saying about a decade ago.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly. I know I was a teenager. It was before my mission, so that's the only thing I remember for sure on the timeline.
Okay, thanks for the help there, Taylor. Okay. So mission in Florida.
Yeah.
Were there any really significant experiences you had on your mission that you feel might have had a big impact on your life, or was it more the overall 2-year discipline, getting the gospel really well into your head that's sort of had a major impact on your life, do you think?
My mission was an interesting animal. Let's put it that way. I experienced a lot of mental health issues on the mission that I'd never really experienced before. Well, that's not true. So I did have some depression stuff in high school, but it never really manifested because I was always able to have distraction or coping skill or something. On the mission, you got none of that. You're just thrown in. You can't watch TV. You can't go on a drive or anything. So I had some mental health difficulties. I was able to work through most of them. So I think a big thing, though, is in my mission, there's a major university that I ended up coming back to when I went for a master's degree. I applied back to that university, and so I was able to live in one of the areas I served in, years down the line. And it was interesting going back to all my old areas and seeing who was still active and who wasn't. And it was very surprising, like who was strong in the church and who didn't. Sometimes it wasn't, you could kind of tell at the time, like, yeah, not so sure about this one. But it was surprising who was active and who wasn't. I never really had much difficulty with discipline, like coming from a Commonwealth country with Commonwealth parents. You know how it is. It's very, this is the way it is. So I never had any issues like getting up in the morning, studying, and doing the things I needed to. That's never been my issue. I think the biggest thing was this was my come to Jesus time, I think. As we say in the States, you gotta come to Jesus. And because I really had to, I learned very quickly I couldn't do it on my own. And I think that was the big thing. Like, I coasted through life fairly easily up to that point. There were some difficulties here and there, but nothing super major. And then I got thrown into the mission field, and I was like, oh crap, what am I doing here? And so I think that was the biggest impact, is I had to learn to rely on someone other than myself, whether that be companions, mission president, Christ himself. I think that was the biggest thing, because I've always been kind of this independent person. I've have this kind of I'll just do it myself mentality. I still have that to a certain extent. I'll just do it myself. But I think the mission really opened me up to okay, it's okay to accept help from whatever source you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think, having had that experience of serving a mission, coming home, and we haven't explored coming home and how much after you came home you got married, was your sweetheart waiting for you, and you went straight from the airport to the temple, or?
I got written off on my mission. and I feel like most missionaries get written off. So I got written off. I got married at 24. So it was significantly after my mission that I got married. So
okay.
It was not a straight to the temple situation.
Okay. Maybe we won't talk about all the young adult years. The young adult years, coming home off your mission and finding a wife and getting married, that can be an interesting time in itself, and it can be a real growing up time. But
that was when I met John, actually, and that was an interesting time in our lives, because we were both kind of that post home from mission, didn't have any direction. Actually, my most difficult time was after my mission, because I had no direction. We were stuck in immigration hell. Didn't know what to do with school. I still was dealing with mental health issues, and that was my difficult time, was post mission, actually. So, but it all worked out in the end.
Yeah. How long have you been married for now?
I will be married 7 years in August.
Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. So, and now you live in this little town. What's the name of the town you live in?
I live in a little town called West Plains, Missouri.
West Plains, Missouri. Okay, a big shout out to all the people watching from West Plains, Missouri.
Which is exactly 0.
So you're in a ward or a branch of the church there?
It is a ward, and we actually just got announced the temple close to us in Springfield, Missouri, which is about an hour and a half, which was really a surprise. I was like, really? Springfield?
Fantastic.
It was very interesting. I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that.
Is there a famous family from Springfield, Missouri?
What was that?
Is there some famous family from Springfield, Missouri? No?
Brad Pitt's from Springfield.
Oh, no, I'm thinking, aren't the Simpsons from there? Is that,
No,
no?
that's Springfield, Illinois.
Oh, okay. No, I had the Springfield right there.
Yeah, there's
Not aware.
lots of Springfields in the U.S.
Okay, I'm not aware of that. I don't know of any Springfields in Australia. Hey, Scott, it's been great talking to you this morning for me, this evening for you. We're on the verge. Well, here in Australia, it's Good Friday. It's Easter Friday here right now.
Yeah, we're still on Thursday here.
Yeah. So it's been great catching up with you. You've got church coming up on Sunday. Before I ask you a couple of last questions, what responsibility do you have in the church there in the ward?
I'm in the young men's.
Okay, which blends in well with your day job as well, huh?
It's true, and it actually reminds me that there's normal kids in the world.
Yeah.
Because
and that's great.
I'll go to work and there's all these kids that have had these difficulties, and then I come to young men's. I'm like, oh wait, there are normal kids.
Yeah, that's reassuring, isn't it? So, and that sort of leads me to think about how life might have been for you if you didn't grow up in the church. Well, and let me rephrase that. I don't like using that statement, growing up in the church, because most people have normal homes that they live in. They don't actually live in a church. But growing up in a Latter-day Saint family, as opposed to, you've seen families, working in the outside world. How do you think you're different as a result of that?
Well, it is interesting because I do have some insight as to what it would look like, because the majority of my extended family are not members of the church. And so every now and again when I'm around them, I'm like, okay, this is what it could have been like. And most of the time, not that great. My dad's family have had all sorts of mental health issues. Like his uncles, they all drink and stuff. And his aunt has been through a whole lot of hardships in her life just from bad choices she's made. My mom's family is pretty similar, not so much the mental health issues, but just people making bad decisions and things like that. And certainly the whole trajectory of my life would be different. I think if we had ended up in the States, it wouldn't have been in Utah. I certainly wouldn't have met my wife. I wouldn't have gone to school there, gotten the degrees I did. I wouldn't have gone on a mission, which means I probably wouldn't have gotten my second degree at the place I did. And so, really, it's pretty interesting how influential the church has been, even in a not so direct way, because you can kind of trace the steps. We're like, okay, we're in the States because my dad's friend who grew up within the church offered us a job in Utah. Oh, I'm going to school in Utah because that's where I am. I'm going on a mission to Florida, and because I went on a mission to Florida, I went back to school at the school that I was serving on as a missionary. I met my wife in Utah because that's where I was, and had been in the same town as her. It's all these little things that you realize would not have been possible without the church's influence.
Yeah, it's interesting when you listen to a lot of people these days who have left the church, and they seem to forget that they're where they are because of the church and because of their beliefs, and then they want to throw all those beliefs away. And I get frustrated when I hear those sort of stories. So it's always good to know.
I kind of get it, because I've had a lot of friends and even some family that have started to leave the church, and there's a lot of things that I think the church does deserve some valid criticism of. But for me, I think the reason to criticize the church in that manner is to learn from it, not to throw it under the bus. We can look at these mistakes that we made in the past and say, okay, if we've made these mistakes, what can we do to not make these mistakes ever again? You know, we talk about the priesthood ban. We talk about, you know, the recent thing, which is the sexual abuse in the church. All of these things, we shouldn't be scared to talk about them, because that's how we become better. We can look at those examples and say, okay, we messed up. Like, we need to be accountable for that. Let's make sure that never happens again.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Okay, Scott, I think we're getting towards the end of our time, which has been a great time. So tell me, is there an aspect of the gospel that is your sort of thing? And leading into that, could you be a testimony for us?
Yeah, it's funny. When I was a missionary, I was known as the Bible bashing missionary, because I could quote scripture like it was in my sleep. I'm not as good as I used to be, but I think for me, the good part of the gospel, other than the family thing, you know, we love the eternal families aspect. I think that's one of the awesome aspects of the gospel. But to me, it just makes sense, you know, and I think that's often overlooked from my perspective, where I've had a lot of friends in a lot of different faiths. I have friends that are in other Christian faiths. I had friends growing up who were Muslim and Tamil and atheist. You know, the gambit. I know a lot of people of pretty much everything, and I'm pretty open to listening to their beliefs. Like, I'll sit down and have a good conversation with them and be like, so why are you atheist? Why, you know, I want to learn from people. I think, you know, the glory of God is intelligence, and we shouldn't shut ourselves off from learning new truth. So I like to listen to people and why they're the way they are, and why they choose to be in the religions or not that they choose to be. And I think, to me, at some point, there comes a point whenever I listen to them where something doesn't make sense. And I kind of have to pause and say, okay, I'm not so sure, like, why this feels off, or it doesn't make sense in my brain, and kind of go back and forth. But I think there are still things in the church that we don't know. Like, I'll put that out there. Like, Revelation is still ongoing. Having said that, the church makes sense to me. The way that Christ performed the atonement for the way he did, to the way that we commit ourselves to being Christ-like, it all makes sense to me. And especially the way the Book of Mormon came forth, because a lot of people are like, well, you believe in this Mormon Bible or whatever, and I'm like, the Book of Mormon itself doesn't teach us that much new stuff, but what it is the proof that the church was restored. And that's the crucial thing, is that you can take the Book of Mormon for what it is, you know, do your thing. If you believe it, you have to accept the rest of it, you know. Like, when Joseph Smith did his thing, you know, there's no logical way he could have done what he did with the amount of knowledge he had and the amount of education he had. It just does not make sense, like, on any level. And so the logical conclusion then is that he's telling the truth, is that what he said is true, that he was visited by an angel, that he was given the location of an ancient record, and was able to translate it by the power of God. And to me, the details are kind of ancillary to that, but regardless. And I think that's the crucial thing, is that the church makes sense. That's not to say that the church is perfect. It certainly is not. We've all seen examples even within our lifetimes, where there's some big mess ups. People make mistakes. People are imperfect. And I think going back to maybe not so much the institution of the church, but to where the source of our testimony and priesthood comes. And I always, kind of the thing in the States is, what would Jesus do? People say that all the time. And I think we overlook that too much. And I think people forget to be Christ-like when they should be, they get stuck in the details of the thing, where it's just like, do the right thing. We sing a song, like, do what is right, let the consequence follow. It doesn't matter what you do, just do the right thing. And I think, to me, that's where I kind of like to focus on, is what would Christ do? Is Christ gonna pop this guy in the mouth because he was mouthing off to me? Like, no, probably not. So maybe I shouldn't do that thing. Or this person is, and especially in the work I do, like, this person is emotionally distressed. Am I going to stand here and lecture them? No, I'm going to be their friend for this minute. And I think, that's kind of gone in a different turn than what I was expecting, actually. But yeah, I think for me, like, the church just makes sense. The institution isn't perfect. The people aren't perfect. But the source of our testimony is, and I think that's the important part.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. It's been great talking to you this morning. Really enjoyed it, and we'll have to get together again sometime. Maybe do another.
I'll have to connect you with my grandmother, because she's got a very fun story that I think you'll enjoy.
Oh yeah. I'd like to talk to your grandma. That's for sure. And I wouldn't mind talking with you and JC on Family Bro Evening again sometime. Pick a subject.
We always have a good time on Family Bro Evening. We can kind of go into this other stuff that we do. Yeah.
So just before we go, I must say, we met through Family Bro Evening, which is an easy podcast to find. Just type in Family Bro Evening. I'm jealous of your name, because my gathering name is fairly hard to find. You've got to in your podcast player, you've got to type in Gathering and my name to get anywhere. But Family Bro Evening is easily found in the world of podcasts, and you'll have an interesting and informative listen while you're driving to work or whatever you're doing, if you're listening to Scott and John on Family Bro Evening. So thanks again.
Yeah, we did, for those of you who are not really familiar with us, my co-host JC did an interview with Elder Ceff. Was last week, I forget, I don't remember. And our most recent episode is kind of the same thing. We interviewed Elder Ceff about kind of the challenges and experiences of senior missionaries in the modern church, and it's been a great time. I've thoroughly enjoyed our time.
Thanks very much, Scott. You have a nice evening over there. You can sit back and relax now and spend some time with your wife.
I get to hang out with my dog. She's just sleeping in the corner, and my wife will come down. We'll watch some TV before bed, and relax the rest of the day. And unfortunately, it's not Friday here, so I got one more day of work, so we'll see.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Bye for now.
Cheers.
If you have an interesting story to tell, please contact us via our Instagram page or send an email to gathering@proton.me.